A single shot from a squirt gun triggered the deadliest war humanity had ever seen. Randy Taylor, an eccentric explorer seeking the rarest artifacts in the universe, ventured into the heart of the Andromeda Galaxy on a solo mission. His ship crash-landed on the planet Barzus, a world ruled by the fierce warrior race known as the Barzans. As Randy emerged from the wreckage, he encountered Nox, a high-ranking Barzan diplomat overseeing a sacred ritual. In a misguided attempt at humor, Randy playfully squirted Nox with his ancient super soaker, unaware of the grave cultural taboo he had just violated. The Barzans, having never seen a water gun, mistook it for a weapon of mass destruction capable of liquefying their bodies. Outraged and humiliated, Nox declared Randy's actions an act of war against their entire species. News of the attack spread across the galaxy, and the Barzan Emperor mobilized a fleet of 500,000 heavily armed warships, each equipped with planet-destroying weapons, to annihilate all human colonies in retaliation. Randy desperately tried to explain the misunderstanding, but the language barrier and the Barzans' ingrained warrior culture made communication nearly impossible. With humanity's fate hanging in the balance, Randy found himself as the lone human, standing between his species and extinction. Armed only with his wits, his water gun, and a dwindling water supply, he had to find a way to prevent the impending galactic war and bridge the gap between two vastly different cultures. The Barzans were a proud and fiercely territorial race, their culture revolving around honor, combat, and conquest. Their warships were among the most formidable in the galaxy, their warriors trained from birth to be ruthless and unforgiving. As Randy navigated this treacherous landscape, he began to realize the gravity of his actions and the chain of events that could lead to the destruction of everything he held dear. With time running out and the odds stacked against him, Randy had to use every ounce of his ingenuity and courage to find a way to prevent a catastrophic war that could reshape the fate of the entire galaxy. As the Barzan Armada prepared for war, Randy worked feverishly to repair the damaged Barzan to English translation device recovered from his ship's wreckage. His fingers flew over the alien circuitry, rewiring connections and reprogramming subroutines with a skill born of desperation. The device sputtered and sparked, its lights flickering erratically, but Randy refused to give up. He knew this was his only chance to prevent the impending galactic catastrophe. In the grand throne room of the Barzan Palace, Emperor Zoltar stood before a holographic projection of his vast armada. Thousands of warships hung in the void, their weapons primed and ready to unleash destruction upon the human colonies. Zoltar's eyes gleamed with anticipation, his heart filled with the thrill of impending conquest. Princess Arya stood at her father's side, her brow furrowed with concern. "Father, are you certain this is the wisest course of action?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease gnawing at her gut. "Perhaps we should investigate further before committing to war." Zoltar turned to face his daughter, his expression hard and unyielding. "You doubt the honor of the Barzan Empire?" he growled, his hand resting on the hilt of his plasma sword. "This human has insulted us, challenged our supremacy. We must respond with swift and merciless force, or risk appearing weak in the eyes of the galaxy." Arya held her tongue, knowing that further protest would only inflame her father's temper. She bowed her head in deference, even as her mind raced with alternative strategies. The doors to the throne room burst open, and a squad of Barzan soldiers marched in, dragging a battered and bruised Randy between them. They shoved him to his knees before the Emperor, the muzzle of a plasma rifle pressed against the back of his skull. "Your Highness, we found this human scum lurking in the ruins of his ship," the squad leader reported, his voice dripping with disdain. "He was attempting to activate some kind of communication device." Zoltar leaned forward on his throne, his eyes narrowing as he studied the pitiful creature before him. "So, the mighty warrior who dared to attack my diplomat," he sneered, his lips curling into a predatory smile. "Have you come to beg for mercy or to face your doom with honor?" Randy struggled to his feet, ignoring the warning growls of the soldiers surrounding him. He held up the translation device, its lights blinking weakly. "I have a message for you, Emperor Zoltar," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. a message that could prevent this war before it begins. Zoltar's eyes flashed with anger, but a flicker of curiosity danced behind the rage. He nodded to the soldiers, who stepped back, allowing Randy to activate the device. The human's words poured out in a garbled stream of static and distortion, the translation matrix struggling to convey the nuances of his speech. Emperor Zoltar, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. Randy's voice crackled through the device. The weapon I used against your diplomat was not a weapon at all, but a harmless toy, a device for spraying water, nothing more. I meant no offense, no challenge to your authority. I am not a warrior, but an explorer, seeking only to learn and understand. The device sputtered and died, its power expended. Randy looked up at the Emperor, hope and fear warring in his eyes. For a long moment, Zoltar was silent, his expression unreadable. Then, to Randy's horror, the Emperor threw back his head and laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the throne room. You expect me to believe such a preposterous lie? Zoltar roared, his face contorted with rage. You dare to insult my intelligence, human? Your feeble attempts at deception only seal your fate, and the fate of your entire species. With a gesture, Zoltar summoned his guards. Take this filth to the dungeons, he commanded, his voice cold and hard. Prepare the armada for immediate departure. We will cleanse the galaxy of the human infestation, starting with their nearest colony. Let the stars tremble before the might of the Barzan Empire. As the guards dragged Randy away, Princess Arya watched, her heart heavy with foreboding. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that her father's actions would lead to ruin and devastation on an unimaginable scale. Silently, she vowed to find a way to stop this madness, to uncover the truth behind the human's words, and prevent the galaxy from descending into the flames of war, even if it meant defying her father, her emperor, and everything she had been raised to believe. The fate of billions hung in the balance, and time was running out. The dungeon's dank air clung to Randy's skin as he paced his cell, his mind racing for a solution. The distant sound of marching feet echoed through the stone corridors, growing louder with each passing moment. Suddenly, the cell door swung open, revealing Princess Arya, her face hidden beneath a hooded cloak. Quickly, she whispered, tossing Randy a guard's uniform. We don't have much time. As they navigated the labyrinthine passages of the Barzan Palace, Arya explained her plan. The command center is our best chance to stop this madness. We can broadcast your message to the entire fleet. Disguised as guards, they slipped into the bustling command center. Holograms flickered all around them, displaying the positions of the Barzan Armada as it approached human space. Randy's stomach churned as he watched red dots representing human colonies blink out one by one. There, Arya pointed to a communication terminal. Can you hack it? Randy's fingers flew across the alien interface, rewiring circuits and bypassing security protocols. I think I've got it, he muttered, activating the broadcast system. As Randy's message beamed across the galaxy, hope swelled in his chest. But that hope was short-lived. The garbled translation twisted his words, transforming his plea for peace into what sounded like a declaration of war. Chaos erupted in the command center. Alarms blared as Barzan officers shouted orders, their faces contorted with rage. Randy and Arya ducked behind a console, narrowly avoiding a barrage of plasma fire. This way, Arya hissed, leading Randy down a hidden passage. They emerged in a dimly lit chamber, its walls adorned with ancient murals and artifacts. Randy's eyes widened as he spotted a familiar shape etched into the stone. Arya, look, he exclaimed, pointing to a carving that bore an uncanny resemblance to his super soaker. Arya's face paled. The liquefier, she breathed. It can't be. As Arya recounted the legend of Dr. Zorn and his creation, Randy's mind raced. We need to find him, he declared. He's our only chance to prove the truth about the water gun. They crept through the palace, evading patrols until they reached the hangar. Commandeering a sleek Barzan scout ship, they blasted off into space, following the coordinates of an ancient star map. The uncharted planet loomed before them, its surface a patchwork of dense jungles and crystalline lakes. As they descended through the atmosphere, Randy spotted a glint of metal hidden among the foliage. Landing in a small clearing, they approached the entrance to Dr. Zorn's hidden laboratory. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a cavernous space filled with bubbling vats, crackling energy fields, and strange, pulsating machines. "Who dares disturb my solitude?" a voice boomed from the shadows. A figure emerged, tall, hunched, with wild white hair, and eyes that gleamed with an unsettling intensity. Randy held up his hands, the super soaker dangling from his fingers. "Dr. Zorn, we need your help." The scientist's eyes locked onto the water gun, his expression shifting from hostility to fascination. "Curious," he muttered, snatching the toy from Randy's grasp. "Very curious indeed." As Zorn examined the super soaker, Arya explained their predicament. The scientist's eyes lit up with excitement. "A chance to prove the true nature of my creation? How delightful." For hours they worked tirelessly, modifying the water gun with advanced Barzan technology. Randy watched in awe as the toy transformed, its plastic shell repimbued with sleek metal, pulsing with energy. "Behold," Zorn cried, holding up the modified super soaker, "a non-lethal weapon capable of disabling Barzan warships with a concentrated electromagnetic pulse." Randy grasped the upgraded water gun, feeling its power thrumming through his hands. He turned to Arya, drive etched on his face. "Let's end this war." As they prepared to leave, alarms blared throughout the laboratory. Zorn's eyes widened in panic. "We've been discovered!" On the security monitors, they watched as a squad of elite Barzan warriors touched down outside, led by a towering figure in ornate armor. "My father!" Arya gasped. "He's found us!" Randy gripped the modified super soaker tightly, his heart pounding. They had come too far to fail now. With the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, they prepared to face the most dangerous adversary yet, Emperor Zoltar himself. Randy's grip tightened on the modified super soaker as Emperor Zoltar's towering form emerged from the smoke. The laboratory's alarms blared, echoing off the jungle canopy outside. "Traitor!" Zoltar roared, his eyes fixed on Arya. "You would side with this human filth against your own people?" Arya stepped forward, chin raised defiantly. "Father, please listen. This weapon is not what you think." A plasma bolt sizzled past her head, silencing her plea. Randy reacted instinctively, pulling Arya behind a row of bubbling vats as Barzan warriors poured into the lab. "We need to get out of here," Randy hissed, eyeing the exit. Dr. Zorn hobbled towards them, his wild eyes gleaming. "Take the emergency tunnel," he wheezed, pressing a data crystal into Randy's hand. "This contains schematics for mass-producing the modified water gun. Use it wisely." A stray shot ignited one of Zorn's experiments. Flames erupted, spreading rapidly through the lab. "Go!" Zorn shouted, activating a hidden panel. A section of wall slid open, revealing a dark passage. Randy and Arya dashed into the tunnel as the lab erupted in chaos behind them. They emerged minutes later in a secluded hangar, housing a sleek Barzan fighter. "Can you fly this thing?" Randy asked as they clambered inside. Arya's fingers danced across the controls. "Watch me!" The fighter rocketed out of the hangar, cloaking systems engaging as they punched through the atmosphere. Stars blurred around them as Arya pushed the engines to their limits. "We need to reach the Armada," Randy said, studying the ship's tactical display. His heart sank as he saw dozens of red markers converging on human colonies. "They've already begun the attack." Arya nodded grimly, plotting an intercept course. As they neared the battle zone, the magnitude of destruction became clear. Barzan warships rained fire upon defenseless human outposts, reducing cities to smoldering rubble. "There!" Arya pointed to a massive vessel at the heart of the Armada. "The flagship. If we can disable it, we might have a chance." Randy readied the super soaker, its modified form humming with energy. "Let's do this." Arya disengaged the cloaking field, and their fighter burst into view amidst the Barzan fleet. Before the enemy could react, Randy fired a concentrated burst from the water gun. A crackling wave of electromagnetic energy washed over the nearest warship. Its shields flickered and died, weapons systems going dark. Alarms blared across the Barzan comm channels as ship after ship fell victim to the modified super soaker's disabling pulse. Fighters scrambled to intercept, but Arya's piloting skills were unmatched. She wove through the chaos, each maneuver bringing them closer to the flagship. A familiar voice boomed across all frequencies. "I will not be made a fool of by some human trickster." Emperor Zoltar raged from the flagship's bridge. "Crone, destroy them!" A sleek obsidian fighter detached from the flagship, its weapons already charging. Randy's stomach dropped as he recognized the ship's pilot, Crone, the most feared warrior in the Barzan Empire. "Hang on!" Arya called, throwing their ship into a series of wild evasive maneuvers. Crone matched them, move for move, his shots coming terrifyingly close. Randy fired the Super Soaker again and again, disabling Barzan ships left and right, but Crone's fighter remained frustratingly out of range. They needed a new strategy. "The asteroid field," Arya said suddenly, banking hard towards a dense cluster of space rocks. "We might lose him in there." They plunged into the field, weaving between massive boulders as Crone gave chase. Randy's palms were slick with sweat as he fired carefully timed bursts, using the Super Soaker's electromagnetic pulse to send asteroids spinning into Crone's path. One by one, Crone's wingmen fell victim to the treacherous environment and Randy's precise shots. Soon, only Crone remained in pursuit. A warning klaxon blared as a lucky shot from Crone grazed their hull. Arya wrestled with the controls, barely avoiding a collision with a bus-sized asteroid. "We can't keep this up forever," Randy shouted over the din of battle. As if in response, Crone's voice crackled over the comm. "Enough of this cowardice. Face me in honorable combat, human." Randy exchanged a look with Arya. It was a risk, but it might be their only chance. "I accept your challenge," Randy replied, hoping his voice didn't betray his fear. They emerged from the asteroid field, making for a desolate, crater-pocked moon nearby. As they touched down on its barren surface, Randy's eyes widened in disbelief. Crone stood waiting, but instead of a plasma rifle or energy sword, he wielded an enormous Barzan water cannon. Randy climbed out of the fighter, modified Super Soaker in hand. He took a deep breath of the moon's thin atmosphere, steadying himself for the duel to come. With a war raging above and two vastly different cultures hanging in the balance, it all came down to this: the most unlikely water gun fight in galactic history. The moon's barren landscape stretched before Randy, its cratered surface bathed in the eerie glow of distant stars. Crone stood 20 paces away, his massive frame dwarfing Randy's. The Barzan warrior's water cannon gleamed menacingly, easily twice the size of Randy's modified Super Soaker. Randy's heart hammered in his chest as he raised his weapon. "Let's end this," he called out, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Crone's response came in the form of a deafening blast from his cannon. A torrent of water, pressurized to cut through steel, rocketed towards Randy. He dove to the side, feeling the rush of air as the stream passed inches from his face. Rolling to his feet, Randy fired back. The Super Soaker's modified stream crackled with electromagnetic energy, striking Crone's shoulder plate. Sparks erupted, but the warrior seemed unfazed. They danced across the lunar surface, exchanging blasts in a deadly game of cat and mouse. Randy's agility gave him an edge, allowing him to duck and weave between Crone's powerful shots. But one glancing hit from that Barzan cannon could end the fight instantly. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Randy's lungs burned as he gulped the thin atmosphere. Sweat stung his eyes despite the moon's frigid temperature. He needed to end this soon. Crone's next blast caught Randy off guard, clipping his leg. Pain lanced through him as he stumbled, nearly losing his footing on the uneven ground. Crone pressed his advantage, closing the distance between them. "Your tricks end here, human," Crone growled, leveling his cannon for a killing blow. Time seemed to slow. Randy saw his opening, a hairline crack in Crone's cannon, likely from the extreme pressure it generated. He aimed carefully, letting out a slow breath. The Super Soaker's stream hit its mark perfectly. Electromagnetic energy surged into the crack, racing through the weapon's internal systems. Crone's eyes widened in shock as his prized cannon began to spark and sputter. "No!" Crone roared, but it was too late. The Barzan water cannon exploded in a spectacular shower of metal and circuitry, knocking the warrior off his feet. Silence fell over the battlefield. Randy approached cautiously, Super Soaker trained on his fallen opponent. Crone lay amid the smoking ruins of his weapon, his armor scorched and dented. "It's over," Randy said, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. "Yield." Crone's shoulders slumped in defeat. He tapped a communication device on his wrist, his voice heavy with shame. "Emperor Zoltar, I have been bested by the human." A moment later, Zoltar's furious voice boomed across the comm channel, ordering the duel's footage to be broadcast across the entire armada. Randy's stomach churned as the Emperor issued his challenge, a final confrontation to determine the fate of the war. As Randy helped Crone to his feet, Arya's fighter touched down nearby. She emerged, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "We need to move quickly," she said, already formulating a plan. "My father won't wait long for his revenge." Randy nodded, gripping the Super Soaker tightly. They had won this battle, but the real test lay ahead. As they boarded Arya's ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that their next encounter would decide far more than just his own fate. The stars blurred around them as they rocketed towards Zoltar's flagship, leaving the lonely moon behind. Randy's mind raced, trying to prepare for the challenge that awaited him. But deep down, he knew that no amount of planning could truly ready him for a showdown with the Emperor of the Barzan Empire. Randy's heart pounded as he faced Emperor Zoltar on the bridge of the Barzan flagship. The modified Super Soaker hummed in his hands, its nozzle trained on the towering alien ruler. "You dare challenge me?" Zoltar's voice boomed through the cavernous space. "I'll crush you like the insignificant insect you are." Randy's finger tightened on the trigger. "Actually, Your Highness, I think it's time we clear up a little misunderstanding." With a swift motion, he fired the Super Soaker. A crackling wave of electromagnetic energy engulfed Zoltar, causing his ornate armor to spark and seize up. The Emperor stood frozen, his eyes wide with shock and fury. "What sorcery is this?" Zoltar sputtered, struggling against his immobilized suit. Randy lowered the water gun and addressed the stunned Barzan crew. "This isn't a super weapon. It's a toy, a child's plaything we call a Super Soaker." He held up the modified water gun, its plastic shell now gleaming with Barzan tech. "We made some upgrades, sure, but at its core, it's just a fancy squirt gun." A murmur rippled through the bridge. Confused looks were exchanged between the Barzan warriors. "He speaks the truth," Arya added, stepping forward. "Father, this entire war was based on a misunderstanding." Randy nodded, continuing his explanation. "Where I come from, kids use these to have water fights on hot summer days. It's not a weapon of mass destruction. It's all in good fun." The silence that followed was deafening. Then from somewhere in the back of the room, a snort of laughter erupted. It was quickly stifled, but soon another joined in. Within moments, the entire bridge was filled with the sound of Barzan warriors howling with laughter. Emperor Zoltar's face contorted with rage. "Silence, you fools! This is no laughing matter." But his words only seemed to fuel the hilarity. Warriors leaned on each other for support, wiping tears from their eyes as they guffawed at the absurdity of the situation. As the laughter finally began to subside, an awkward silence fell over the assembled Barzans. The reality of their situation, a galactic war triggered by a child's toy, began to sink in. Zoltar, still immobilized, spoke through gritted teeth. I order an immediate ceasefire. All Barzan forces are to withdraw from human territories at once." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Randy's shoulders sagged as the tension drained from his body. But Zoltar wasn't finished. His eyes locked onto Randy with laser-like intensity. "You, human, you will be taken into custody to face judgment for your role in this debacle." Randy's stomach clenched, but he nodded. "I'll cooperate. If it helps prevent further conflict, I'll go willingly." Arya stepped closer, her voice low. "Randy, you don't have to do this." "It's okay," he assured her, handing over the Super Soaker. "Sometimes you've got to take responsibility, even for honest mistakes." As a pair of Barzan guards approached to escort him away, Randy caught a glimpse of the starfield outside the flagship's view screen. The glittering expanse of space stretched out before him, a reminder of how far he'd come and how far he still had to go. The journey to Barzus passed in a blur of unfamiliar star systems and alien technology. Randy found himself ushered into a grand chamber, its walls adorned with ancient weapons and battle trophies. Before him sat the Barzan High Council, their weathered faces etched with curiosity and suspicion. As the trial began, Randy recounted the bizarre series of events that had led to this moment. Arya stood beside him, translating his words and adding her own impassioned pleas for understanding. The council members listened intently, their expressions unreadable. When Randy finished speaking, an elderly Barzan with intricate facial tattoos leaned forward. "You claim no malice in your actions," the council member said, his voice gravelly. "Yet the consequences of this misunderstanding have been dire. How do you propose we move forward from here?" Randy took a deep breath, acutely aware that his next words could shape the future of human-Barzan relations. Randy stood before the Barzan High Council, his mind racing as he considered their question. The fate of human-Barzan relations hung in the balance. "We must build bridges, not walls," he said, his voice steady. "I propose a cultural exchange program. Let Barzans experience human customs firsthand and vice versa. Understanding breeds empathy." The council members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. After a tense moment, the elderly Barzan with facial tattoos nodded. "An intriguing proposal. We shall consider it." Weeks later, Randy found himself in a sprawling Barzan government complex, his new office adorned with a mix of human and Barzan artifacts. A plaque on his desk read, "Randy Thompson, Cultural Ambassador to the Barzan Empire." He was reviewing plans for the first wave of human visitors when a commotion erupted in the hallway. The door burst open, revealing a towering Barzan in ornate military regalia. "So this is the human who made fools of us all," the newcomer sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Randy rose, forcing a diplomatic smile. "Admiral Zyrax, I presume. I've heard much about you." Zyrax's eyes narrowed. "Spare me your pleasantries, Ambassador. Your presence here is an insult to Barzan honor." Before Randy could respond, alarms blared throughout the complex. A panicked aide rushed in, gasping for breath. "Explosion at the human-operated power plant. Casualties reported." Randy's stomach dropped. As he raced to assess the damage, he caught a fleeting smirk on Zyrax's face. This was no accident, he realized. The real battle for peace was just beginning. Over the next weeks, a string of similar incidents plagued human facilities on Barzus. Each time, Randy found himself scrambling to contain the fallout, both literal and diplomatic. "It's Zyrax," he insisted to Arya during a late-night strategy session. "He's trying to sabotage everything we've built." Arya frowned, her brow furrowed with worry. "We need proof, Randy. The council won't act on suspicions alone." Their conversation was cut short by the sound of shattering glass. Outside, an angry mob had gathered, hurling rocks at the human compound. "Alien scum!" they chanted. "Go home!" As Randy watched the chaos unfold, a chill ran down his spine. He recognized several of Zyrax's personal guards among the rioters, subtly directing the crowd's fury. The next morning, Randy stood before Emperor Zoltar, his clothes still smelling of smoke from the previous night's violence. "This cannot continue," Zoltar growled. "Your presence is causing unrest among my people. I demand your resignation." Randy met the Emperor's gaze, his eyebrows furrowed. "With all due respect, Your Highness, I will not abandon my post. These attacks are coordinated, not spontaneous. Give me time to prove it." Zoltar's eyes narrowed. "You have one standard week, Ambassador. After that, I expect you gone, one way or another." As Randy left the throne room, he found Arya and Crone waiting. Their faces were grim, but their eyes held a spark of loyalty that gave Randy hope. "We're with you," Crone rumbled, clasping Randy's shoulder. "Where do we start?" Randy's mind raced, piecing together fragments of overheard conversations and suspicious troop movements. "The old military outpost in the Crimson Wastes," he said. "If Zyrax is planning something big, that's where we'll find proof." As they boarded Arya's sleek scout ship, Randy's modified Super Soaker hummed at his side. He had a feeling they'd need every advantage they could get in the days ahead. Randy crouched behind a twisted hunk of metal, the acrid smell of burning electronics filling his nostrils. Arya and Crone flanked him, their eyes scanning the desolate landscape of the Crimson Wastes. The old military outpost loomed ahead, its dilapidated structures a stark contrast to the cutting-edge technology they'd glimpsed through narrow windows. "There," Crone whispered, pointing to a shadowy figure slipping between buildings. "That's one of Zyrax's personal guards." Randy nodded, his modified Super Soaker humming with impossibly strong energy. "Let's move. Remember, we need solid proof of Zyrax's involvement." They crept forward, using the rusted hulks of long-abandoned vehicles as cover. As they neared the main compound, voices drifted through the still air. Randy signaled for silence, straining to hear. "The shipment arrives tonight," a gravelly voice announced. "Once we have the Vikoran weapons, nothing will stand in our way." Randy's eyes widened. He glanced at Arya, who mouthed silently, "Vikorans?" Before they could process this new information, alarms blared throughout the compound. They'd been spotted. "Run!" Randy shouted, unleashing a barrage of electromagnetic pulses from his Super Soaker. The shots connected, shorting out security cameras and door locks. Chaos erupted as Zyrax's loyalists poured from the buildings. Blaster fire scorched the air around them as Randy, Arya, and Crone sprinted for their hidden ship. They dove inside just as a massive explosion rocked the outpost. "What was that?" Arya gasped, her hands flying over the ship's controls. Crone's eyes narrowed as he studied the sensor readings. "Some kind of experimental weapon. We need to get this information to the Council immediately." As their ship rocketed away from the Crimson Wastes, Randy's mind raced. Vikorans, a new alien threat, and Zyrax, orchestrating it all from the shadows. The next day, Randy stood before the Barzan High Council, his heart pounding as he recounted their discovery. The chamber erupted into shocked murmurs as he described the Vikoran connection. Before the council could fully react, the doors burst open. A battered squad of Barzan soldiers dragged in a struggling figure, Admiral Zyrax himself. "Traitor!" Emperor Zoltar thundered, rising from his ornate throne. "You dare conspire against your own people?" Zyrax sneered, his eyes blazing with fanatical intensity. "I act to preserve Barzan's supremacy. You would have us kowtow to these human weaklings." As the council interrogated Zyrax, the full scope of his betrayal became clear. The Vikorans, a highly advanced alien empire, had promised Zyrax unimaginable power in exchange for helping them conquer Barzan space. Randy's blood ran cold as a captured Vikoran operative confirmed their worst fears. A massive invasion fleet was already en route to the Barzan homeworld. In the tense days that followed, Randy found himself working alongside Dr. Zorn, the eccentric Barzan scientist who had first modified his Super Soaker. They pored over the captured Vikorans' advanced gear, searching desperately for a weakness. "We need something that can neutralize their ships," Randy mused, rubbing his tired eyes. "Something like an electromagnetic pulse, but on a massive scale." Dr. Zorn's eyes lit up. Yes, that could work. Give me a few days, and I'll have something that will make your Super Soaker look like a children's toy." True to his word, Dr. Zorn unveiled his creation less than a week later. The Zorn cannon, as it was quickly dubbed, crackled with hardly restrained electromagnetic energy. "One shot from this baby," Dr. Zorn proclaimed proudly, "and those Vikoran ships will be dead in the water." As the Barzan fleet scrambled to equip themselves with the new weapons, long-range sensors detected the approaching Vikoran armada. Randy stood on the bridge of the Barzan flagship, his palms sweaty as he gripped the controls of a Zorn cannon. "All ships," Emperor Zoltar's voice rang out across the comm channels, "prepare to engage. For Barzus." The space around them erupted into chaos as the two fleets clashed. Zorn cannons fired, their electromagnetic pulses slamming into Vikoran ships. One by one, the alien vessels went dark, their systems overloaded. But the Vikorans were quick to adapt. New energy shields sprang to life around their remaining ships, deflecting the electromagnetic pulses. It's not working anymore, Arya shouted from her station. They've found a way to counter the Zorn cannons. Randy's mind raced, searching for a solution. Then it hit him. We need to get inside their systems, he said, his voice steady despite the panic threatening to overwhelm him. A computer virus, something that can override their shielding and weapons from within. He turned to Arya and Crone, willpower etched on his face. Get me a team of your best techs. We've got work to do. As the battle raged around them, Randy huddled with a mixed group of human and Barzan computer experts. Lines of code flew across their screens as they raced against time to create a virus capable of penetrating the Vykaran defenses. Finally, after what felt like hours, a Barzan scientist looked up with a grim smile. It's ready. Randy nodded, taking a deep breath. Then let's end this. He inserted a data chip into his console, his finger hovering over the transmit button. With a silent prayer, he pressed down. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like dominoes falling, Vykaran ships began to power down. Their shields flickered and died. Weapon systems went offline. The Barzan fleet surged forward, Zorn cannons blazing. Crippled Vykaran vessels exploded in brilliant fireballs against the backdrop of space. As the last of the Vykaran ships turned to flee, Randy's eyes locked onto their flagship. He knew what he had to do. I need a shuttle, he announced, already moving towards the hangar bay. I'm going aboard that ship. Arya and Crone exchanged worried glances, but fell in step behind him. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The shuttle rocketed across the debris-filled space between the fleets. As they neared the Vykaran flagship, Randy gripped his trusty super soaker. He had a feeling he'd need it one last time before this was over. Randy's shuttle docked with the Vykaran flagship, the airlock hissing open to reveal a dimly lit corridor. He gripped his super soaker tightly, its familiar weight a small comfort in this alien environment. Arya and Crone flanked him, their own weapons at the ready. Stay alert, Randy whispered. We need to reach their command center. They crept through the ship's winding passages, disabling security systems with precise bursts from Randy's modified water gun. As they neared the bridge, a squad of Vykaran guards rounded the corner. Randy reacted instinctively, his super soaker unleashing a stream of electromagnetic energy that short-circuited their weapons and armor. In the ensuing chaos, they stormed the bridge. Randy faced the Vykaran commander, a towering figure with iridescent scales and multiple arms. It's over, Randy declared. Your fleet is crippled. Surrender now. The commander hissed, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. You think this ends here, human? We are but the first wave. The Vykaran Empire spans galaxies. Before anyone could react, the commander slammed a clawed hand onto a control panel. Alarms blared as the ship's self-destruct sequence engaged. Go, Randy shouted to Arya and Crone. Get to the shuttle. As his companions raced for safety, Randy wrestled with the Vykaran commander, desperately trying to abort the countdown. With seconds to spare, he managed to override the system, his hacking skills put to the ultimate test. The ship shuddered, but held together. Randy sagged with relief, only to find himself surrounded by the remaining Vykaran crew, their eyes filled with a mix of fear and grudging respect. In the days that followed, news of Randy's daring capture of the Vykaran flagship spread throughout Barzan space. He found himself thrust into the spotlight, hailed as a hero by both humans and Barzans alike. Emperor Zoltar summoned Randy to the Imperial Palace, its soaring spires gleaming in the light of Barzus's twin suns. The throne room fell silent as Randy approached, his footsteps echoing on the polished stone floor. Randy Thompson, Zoltar intoned, his voice carrying the weight of ages. You have proven yourself a true friend to the Barzan people. It is my honor to formally appoint you as the first permanent human ambassador to our empire. Randy bowed deeply, his palms sweating at the enormity of this new responsibility. I am humbled by your trust, Your Majesty. I swear to dedicate myself to fostering peace and understanding between our peoples. As he rose, Randy caught sight of Arya beaming at him from her place among the court officials. Crone stood nearby, his usually stern features softened by a hint of pride. In the months that followed, Randy threw himself into his new role with characteristic enthusiasm. He worked tirelessly to establish formal trade agreements, brokering deals that would benefit both human and Barzan economies. Scientific exchange programs flourished under his guidance, with researchers from both species collaborating on groundbreaking projects. One of Randy's most popular initiatives was a series of cultural outreach programs. He used cutting-edge holographic technology to recreate his legendary water gun duel, turning it into an interactive experience that captivated audiences across Barzan space. "See?" Randy explained to a group of wide-eyed Barzan children as they watched his holographic self face off against the fearsome Kezak. "It's not about who's strongest or has the best technology. It's about thinking creatively and finding peaceful solutions." Despite his successes, Randy faced constant challenges. During a diplomatic reception on Barzus, a sudden explosion rocked the building. Randy found himself thrown to the ground, ears ringing as smoke filled the air. "Ambassador!" Krone's voice cut through the chaos. The burly Barzan materialized through the haze, bodily shielding Randy as blaster fire erupted around them. In the aftermath, it was revealed that a rogue Barzan militant cell had attempted to assassinate Randy, seeing him as a threat to their vision of Barzan supremacy. Thanks to Krone's quick action and the efforts of his elite guard, the attackers were swiftly captured. As Randy recovered from his injuries, he received a disturbing transmission from United Earth Space Command. Admiral Hawthorne's hologram flickered to life in Randy's office, her expression grim. "Thompson, there are concerns about your enthusiastic embrace of Barzan culture," she said, her tone clipped. "Some officials here question where your true loyalties lie." Randy bristled at the implication. "With all due respect, Admiral, my loyalty is to peace and cooperation between our species. That's what I was sent here to achieve." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "Just remember who you really serve, Ambassador. We'll be watching." As the transmission ended, Randy slumped in his chair, the weight of his position pressing down on him. He was startled by a knock at the door. Princess Arya entered, her face etched with concern. "I heard about the transmission," she said softly. "Are you all right?" Randy managed a weak smile. "I will be. It's just frustrating. Why can't they see that working together makes us all stronger?" Arya placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll just have to show them. I have an idea." Weeks later, Randy stood before the Barzan High Council once again, this time with Arya at his side. They presented their proposal for a joint human-Barzan scientific research outpost on a neutral world. "This facility will be dedicated to sharing knowledge and resources," Randy explained, his voice filled with passion. "It will be a shining example of what we can achieve when we put aside our differences and work together." The council chambers erupted into heated debate. Some councilors voiced support, while others raised concerns about security and resource allocation. Through it all, Randy and Arya stood firm, addressing each point with carefully prepared counterarguments. As the final votes were tallied, a tense hush fell over the chamber. The chief counselor rose, his expression unreadable. "By a majority decision," he announced, "the proposal for the joint research outpost is approved." Randy's heart soared as cheers filled the chamber. He turned to Arya, finding his own joy mirrored in her eyes. This was just the beginning, he realized. Together, they would build a future where humans and Barzans stood side by side, united in their quest for knowledge and peace. As he left the council chambers, Randy's mind was already racing with plans for the new outpost. There would be challenges ahead, he knew, but for the first time since taking on this role, he felt truly hopeful about the future of human-Barzan relations. Years passed, and Randy's tireless efforts bore fruit. The joint human-Barzan research outpost, once a mere proposal, now stood as a beacon of interspecies cooperation. Its gleaming spires and sprawling laboratories stretched across the surface of a neutral world, teeming with scientists from both races working side by side. Randy stood at the viewport of his office, gazing out at the bustling facility with pride. The past few years had been challenging, but the results spoke for themselves. Breakthrough after breakthrough in medicine, technology, and space exploration had elevated both human and Barzan civilizations to new heights. A chime at his door interrupted his reverie. "Come in," he called, turning to greet his visitor. Arya entered, her face etched with concern. "Randy, we have a problem." Before she could elaborate, alarms blared throughout the facility. Randy's communicator crackled to life with panicked voices, reporting a rapidly spreading illness. Within hours, the outpost descended into chaos. Randy worked tirelessly alongside medical teams, watching helplessly as hundreds succumbed to the mysterious virus. The quarantine protocols they had in place proved ineffective against its virulent spread. In the aftermath of the outbreak, Randy sat in an emergency meeting with Barzan and human leaders. The atmosphere was tense, accusations flying. Admiral Crichton, a hardline Barzan military leader, smacked his head on the table. "This was no accident. Our intelligence points to Vicarian involvement. They've developed this as a bioweapon to destabilize our alliance." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Randy stood, raising his hands for calm. "We can't jump to conclusions. We need to investigate thoroughly before taking any drastic actions." Crichton's eyes narrowed. "Your pacifism will be our downfall, Ambassador. We must strike now, before the Vicarians can launch another attack." Despite Randy's protests, preparations for military action began. He found himself working against the clock, trying to uncover the truth before war erupted. Weeks of tense negotiations followed. Randy stood before the Vicarian ambassador, a towering figure with iridescent scales and multiple arms. "We need answers," Randy insisted. "If your people are not responsible, help us find who is." The ambassador's multifaceted eyes glinted. "We had no part in this tragedy, but know this, human. If you do not cease your operations within our territory, we will have no choice but to respond with overwhelming force." As Randy left the meeting, his mind raced. Something about the ambassador's demeanor felt off. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on behind the scenes. Late one night, as Randy pored over intelligence reports in his office, a shadow detached itself from the wall. He barely had time to react before a blade whistled past his ear. Randy rolled, grabbing his modified super soaker from its place of honor on the wall. The assassin was lightning fast, but Randy had honed his skills over the years. They traded blows in the darkness, Randy's weapons spitting bursts of electromagnetic energy that short-circuited the attacker's high-tech gear. Just as the assassin gained the upper hand, the door burst open. Crone charged in, bodily tackling the intruder. "Run!" he roared to Randy. Randy hesitated, unwilling to abandon his friend. In that moment of indecision, the assassin produced a hidden weapon. There was a flash, a scream of pain. When the chaos subsided, Randy knelt beside Crone's broken body. The burly Barzan managed a weak smile. "It was an honor. Blood brother," he whispered before his eyes closed for the final time. Grief threatened to overwhelm Randy, but he forced it down. There would be time to mourn later. For now, he had a war to prevent and a friend's sacrifice to honor. In the days that followed, Randy assembled a small team for a dangerous mission. Arya and Dr. Zorn stood with him as they prepared to journey to the fringes of Vicarian space, determined to uncover the truth behind the virus and stop the looming conflict before it was too late. As their ship slipped into stealth mode, Randy gripped his trusty super soaker. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them. For Crone, for peace, and for the future of human Barzan cooperation that they had worked so hard to build.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.